Gary and I have decided to take a bold programming gamble and move most of our Saturday morning programs to prime time in the fall. But now, live from New York, it's Saturday night.
Hello and welcome to the Not Ready for Primetime Project. We're Gary Seath and Brad Robinson.
And you're not.
This week on the early years, we're talking about Season 4, Episode 18, with host Michael Palin and musical guest James Taylor. This show originally aired on May 12th, 1979. Brad, it's another Python. That can only mean one thing for us.
Actually, false, Gary. You know, normally what this would mean is, yes, we would get some guy off the street claiming to be British of some sort and having knowledge of the British ways. And we've just been duped far too many times. So I'm happy to announce, finally, it only took us almost 4 seasons, a true British correspondent, the editor of Empire magazine and author of such amazing books such as Wild and Crazy Guys and The Last Action Hero, Nick de Semlyen. How are you, Nick?
I'm good. I hate to do this to you, though, but I'm half American. I'm sorry to reveal it to you live on air.
Nick, just let us... Could you just give us that, please?
It's still...
We're so close.
It's still less than the other guy, so you're good.
I'm taking it. I'm taking it as a win.
My British half is strong, I would say. I've always lived here, so I'll take that. But
there we go. As will we.
Yeah.
But welcome so much. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Love the show.
Thank you.
Wild and Crazy Guys is a great book. People might remember it's about comedies in the 80s, the American comedies in the 80s, which are really, really great. But we referenced this book back last season because the prologue of that book is the infamous story of Chevy Chase coming back to host SNL and the big fight with Bill Murray beforehand. So you've been mentioned on our pod before.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I got to sit down with Bill Murray at Cannes when he was there for Moonrise Kingdom and talk to him for about 20 minutes over a plate of cookies. I ate most of them. And I had to bring up this famous fight, and he gave me a pretty great quote. And then, I spoke to John Landis, who was there as well, and a few other people. So that kind of felt like a really nice place to start when you're talking about these guys and what they would end up becoming.
It's a great book. I think Brad actually sent it to me when it came out, if I'm remembering correctly, because he's just that nice of a guy, Nick. No, he read it and
Let's
he was
go
like,
with this story. Keep going.
No,
yes.
It was one of those books where Brad was like, oh, I read this book. This is amazing. You've got to read this and send it to me. And it was, again, it's just so wonderfully done. And as fans of that time period, it was, totally captivating. So thanks for writing that book.
Oh, it was really fun. I mean, it was kind of like a bit inspired by Steve Martin, and he wrote Born Standing Up, which is a great memoir, but it stops just when his career is getting going, and he talks about the jerk, and then that's it. And I got to interview Steve Martin for Empire and asked him, like, how come you didn't do a book about your movies? He said, no one's interested in that. No one wants to hear about the movies. And I was like, I really want to read that book. So if you're not going to write it, Steve Martin, then I will have a go at doing it. Because all those movies, the Three Amigos, Ghostbusters have been written about a lot, but a lot of those movies haven't really been chronicled and celebrated in the way that I think they should. So, it was a fun way to do it, to kind of take these 8 guys, mostly from SNL, but some from SCTV, and then kind of just interweave them all.
Yeah.
Interesting guys. And then Saturday Night Live also appears in my more recent book, Last Action Heroes, thanks to Steven Seagal, who did one of the more infamous, to quote from El Guapo in Three Amigos, an infamous episode of SNL.
Yeah, that's a great story in the new book too. Yeah. And the new one's great. Last Action Heroes, about the action movies of the 80s.
I have a real soft spot for Under Siege, but maybe not because Steven Seagal.
Yes.
That's a fun one.
We just did the Gary Busey episode.
Oh
yes. Gary Busey is great in Under Siege. That's another great story. I love this. Oh God. We'll get to this episode eventually.
We're fine. You know what? This is more fun. Just spoiler alert.
Yeah. The story in your book about Under Siege, where Busey comes up with the idea to do the bit in drag and how he brings it to Seagal, and Seagal's like tries to shut it down, and Busey goes, I believe your term was full Busey on him, and just does it anyway. I love that story. Sorry.
Incredible. I mean, I had not seen his episode of Saturday Night Live until a couple of weeks ago, kind of prepping for this by going back and filling in some of those episodes. And it is a wild ride, I gotta say. Like,
yes, it
is. It is not, there isn't like a pre-Busey. And do you know what I mean? I hadn't realized he was quite that Busey. Levels of Buseyosity were high even back then.
Yeah, he came in at full Busey, it turns out. There was no ramping up.
Yes.
It's just... he was always at 11.
Indeed.
So, Nick, are you a Monty Python fan? Or are you a Michael Palin fan?
Big Monty Python fan. But Monty Python was really my gateway to comedy. I mean, the Saturday Night Live and Monty Python, in terms of the movies that the Saturday Night Live guys made, that was a huge thing for me when I was growing up. But definitely Monty Python. I used to have the huge Monty Python book, which was like the scripts of all their sketches, and I would like memorize them and perform them with my friends at school. A very British thing. I did
Nice.
4 Yorkshiremen when I was 15, which I'm sure was absolutely terrible on stage at school. So no, the Monty Python are real heroes of mine. And actually one of the most exciting things that came of my writing these books was Eric Idle. I don't know if you guys have seen, but on his website, he writes every book he reads, he writes a little blurb of. And he read Wild and Crazy Guys, and he wrote a little thing, and I couldn't kind of believe that someone from Monty Python had read that. You know, he's worked with a lot of those guys. Yeah. So that was
awesome.
That was a real thrill. But no, I love Michael Palin as well. He's who doesn't love Michael Palin?
Probably no one that's listening to this show anyway doesn't love Michael Palin, or they should.
Well, there's that moment at the end of this show where everyone just hugs him and starts giving him noogies, and that's how everyone feels about
like
Michael
Palin. Genuine love for him, yeah. James Taylor and Bill Murray throw him on their shoulders and like carrying him around the stage.
Right.
Like you could tell everyone loves him, yeah.
He seems like the kind of person that just is genuinely funny, yes, but also nice, and just kind of gets along with everyone seemingly in the cast on the show. So it is always fun when he's on.
He's so nice and so British, but also has that kind of acidic wit. And I'm sure you guys have read his diaries. I had read them a few years ago, and I kind of revisited them for this. But, you know, some of his descriptions of the Saturday Night Live guys, his description of John Belushi as big and panting like a steam engine at a station. It's a brilliant, like, put down of Belushi, but in a nice, polite British way.
In a nice way.
Very British way, yes.
Yeah.
It's very British of him. Well, this is his third time hosting SNL, right?
Yeah. Last of the original era. He will come back in season 9 for one more time. A couple guest spots here and there.
Yeah, and it's always fun to see him. I'm always excited. It always seems like the cast and the writers are excited to put on a show with Michael Palin and kind of adopt some of that Python sensibility a little, even more than generally, I think.
Yeah. He's one of those hosts. He doesn't need a reason to be on the show. They would take him anytime he wants to come on because he's that good and he's that much fun. Because he had, like, there's nothing going on since the last time we saw him, only a few months, but it's, how would you pass up an opportunity to do a show with Michael Palin?
Right.
What's interesting is in the diaries, he admits that he didn't really want to do this episode, that he wanted to write a book and he had to kind of be talked into it. In fact, he tried to get out of it, and then he couldn't back down because everyone from Saturday Night Live had gone on holiday. And so he ended up like having to go to New York and do it anyway. That's quite a British thing, trying to get out of stuff, but it's being too polite to actually not do it.
And he doesn't love this episode. I mean, he's written in those diaries that it's the least favorite of his three appearances during this era. I wonder how hard they pushed to get him after the last one, after the Milton Berle debacle, and it's been a month. They had time. I wonder, like, if like the sealing the deal of Palin coming on to host was after Milton Berle, after they saw how bad of a train wreck that went, they needed some way to save themselves, and they knew they had the time, and they got Michael in because it makes sense, to try to rebound with him.
So it was kind of, get Palin. We need the nicest man on earth to counterbalance the Milton Berliness.
Yeah.
We need the nice one.
Yeah. Well, I think, we often have said that over the last, 4 seasons of this show, where they go through a stretch of, 3 or 4 hosts that are a little shaky and unknown quantities. And then they'll bring in someone like a Buck Henry or a Steve Martin, a known quantity, where they're just like, all right, we're going to get something good with these guys. So that's possibly, to your point, Brad, what we got here with Michael Palin after Milton Berle.
Or what they hope to get.
Or what they hope to get.
I hear what you're saying.
I wonder if this one was a little bit rushed in terms of the prep. It kind of feels like it in terms of, we'll get onto the monologue soon, I'm sure.
Yeah. But, I know what you mean, though.
Well, it's an interesting construct of an episode. We had the Richard Benjamin one recently where they had that epic Pepsi syndrome sketch. And this episode has a sketch that's even longer than that, I think. Or maybe almost as long.
Almost as long. It's not longer, but it's
almost long. But then they double down with a second sketch that's almost as long. So it's another instance of not a lot in terms of numbers of what you see.
Right.
So when you limit yourself, you already put yourself in kind of a weird category of how do you analyze and talk about the show, because it's not your typical show. You don't have as many sketches, you don't have many appearances. And we thought Richard Benjamin's episode worked very well under those constraints, and I would argue that this episode does not.
I would have to agree with you, but I think we should just jump right into it, and then we can get to it and decide. All right. So this week's episode starts with Fred Silverman at a podium talking directly to the audience about his tenure at NBC thus far, which has been about a year. And then he corrects it. He says it was all lies and he's only been there for 11 months. And
it's only partially not true. Only 11 months.
Right. And of course, the press is not touting his successes. This part rang true for, current environment, but they're not touting his successes like Gary Coleman
right.
or keeping Carson from quitting. And he's decided that he's naming Gary Coleman VP of programming because he's not afraid to share his opinions with Fred Silverman. And that was our cold open pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
He does get a Hello Larry joke in there again.
And a Super Train joke.
That's right. He did.
And did they not flash a McLean Stevenson photo up while he's making fun of Hello Larry?
They did. Yes.
Checking all the boxes on a Fred Silverman piece.
Do we know, apologies if you guys have spoken about this and I missed it, but do we know if Fred Silverman actually responded on the record to the sketches, how he felt about Belushi because it's quite unusual to have an actor ribbing an executive repeatedly.
Brad, do you know if he said anything about Belushi? I know there were problems later with some pieces that Al Franken wrote, but...
Right. I don't know about the Belushi. And I think at the time, too, just, remembering the situation, NBC was in bad straits. I think Palin even writes about it in his diaries, how he came and he was kind of thrust into this world of NBC having issues. So if Saturday Night Live is your kind of one bright spot of the network, you're kind of not really in a place to speak badly about them no matter what they're doing, because that's really all you got to hang your hat on right now. Except for Diff'rent Strokes, season 1 of Diff'rent Strokes.
Right. Gary Coleman. Yeah, I don't know.
What an amazing concept that show is, Diff'rent Strokes. A wealthy white gentleman takes 2 poor African-American kids from Harlem and brings them into his Manhattan high-rise and raises them as his own.
Hasn't dated a bit.
Just a bit. I don't know. I wasn't crazy about this as a way to start the show, though. And it didn't feel like the audience was really that into it either.
It's a little short on jokes in general, because as you mentioned, it's John direct to camera. So there's not a lot of great jokes in this.
I didn't think so. Nick, how'd you feel about the open here?
It was okay. I a little bit slight. I agree. I don't think there was much in the way of jokes there. It was over very quickly. Yeah, it was a bit forgettable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just jumps right in. Kind of felt like it jumped right into the Live from New York. All of a sudden, they're like, okay, we're out of time. Throw the line in.
Yeah. There was also no setup to it. It was just right to Fred Silverman at a podium, which was kind of awkward. I was wondering why we were listening to, not even a press conference, right? It's like, I don't know. It was just strange, in my opinion. Strange way to start the show, I thought.
If there had been like a Gary Coleman cameo, like a walk-on from him, then that would have been a different thing.
Yes.
But
maybe there was, and they just didn't pan down. I don't know.
Oh, my God.
What? Okay.
Nick is being polite and laughing at your
goodness.
joke.
Yeah.
I'm being Palin-esque.
He'll be back next week. Don't worry.
Well, we get our monologue after that. And again, this is something where Palin has done some different things with his monologues when he's been on. So I was kind of wondering where he was going to go. But this week, because tomorrow in Showtime is Mother's Day, he talks about his mother and how he was sent to work the coal mines as a child because she was writing a book about deprived children. And then he was sent away to the Purgatory Academy for Sons of the Abominably Cruel. And this is the monologue. It's just him talking about this. It felt like he lost a little steam halfway through himself.
Yeah.
Like I don't know.
He wrote in his diary, I think, too. He about halfway through, he kind of checked out. He had issues. I think Nick mentioned it earlier, this monologue and just some of the issues he had with it.
Well, he wrote this monologue himself, and he talks in his diaries about, it feels very Python-esque. I don't think it's a big surprise that he did it himself, because actually I mentioned Four Yorkshiremen earlier, and it's got a bit of that Four Yorkshiremen humor of just the most terrible upbringing you can possibly imagine. I actually think this monologue has a lot of really funny lines. I didn't mind it. It was just not as high concept as his previous ones. It felt like something he may have been developing for Python or for something else. I think he even says that it was like inspired by speeches that he had done for Cambridge and Oxford unions when he had gone and done speeches there. So it didn't feel hugely geared towards SNL, but I thought there's some really funny lines, the idea of babies in the coal mines, and there's one who has someone to wet his diaper for him. And then just a line really tickled me where he says his mother was writing this book about deprived children and then sent him away from home to give us some more to write. It's just such a stupid line.
Yeah.
So I thought it was witty, but it does have a feeling of something he knocked together in a couple of days.
I did like it better than his last one, though, Gary. The sock monologue, I thought this was a little bit of a better construct, even though I guess this did get chopped up a bit after Dress. They went back and Lauren sent Al Franken into his dressing room to work on trimming the monologue. But even that said, it's not as noticeable as that Richard Benjamin episode monologue where it seemed like there was a whole minute just taken out of it that just didn't make sense. It still flowed, and I agree with Nick. I enjoyed this monologue. I thought it was fun.
I think, there's something to when he and Eric Idle too, some of the things that they do, it's so subtle and you have to listen to what they're saying. You see it later on in this next sketch too, really, of, the subtlety of what's being said. Sometimes I think it's lost on the audience in the moment. And the absurdness of the, putting the cat down his pants in his first monologue plays better to the American audience. We're not as smart as you are, Nick.
Well, thank you very much.
Or we just don't pay attention. That's probably it.
Yeah, it definitely requires that it's more witty wordplay than Cats Down Trousers. Definitely feels more geared towards, a Cambridge group assemblage of students. But I had a really good time with it. I actually rewound it and listened to it again and got something else out of it on a second play. I think it's a really solid monologue.
Yeah. Well, from there, he throws immediately to James Taylor.
Yep.
So we get James Taylor right away, comes on and plays his song, Johnny Comes Back. My immediate reaction was, well, there were two, actually. One was, hey, it's Leland Sklar and the Section, the band playing with him. But the other was, what is this set?
Oh, the set?
It looked like a storage room. And then I saw a sign that said pawn shop. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. But I was wondering why we were in a pawn shop.
I was just so confused. I was like, is James Taylor trying to rock? I was completely confused as what he was doing.
Yes, is the answer to that.
Like, who was he trying to fool playing an acoustic guitar during this? Did he think anybody could hear that?
That's his comfort.
Oh,
right? We saw it last time where he was on where he didn't have the guitar.
Maybe he learned his lesson that he can't stand there without it. Yes. He needs to hold a guitar.
Yeah.
Right. You're probably right.
Yeah. Nick, are you a James Taylor fan?
I'm not really a James Taylor fan. I did think this was a pleasant song. I just was confused all the way through this episode why there was so much James Taylor. There's more James Taylor than Michael Palin, and there
is a lot of James Taylor. Yeah.
It's I like his vibe, but 2 songs would have been enough, I think.
Especially this era James Taylor, his vibe with the mustache, and this is, I think, peak cool James Taylor. To your point, Brad, he might be trying to rock, which we can debate whether or not he was successful on that. But
yeah,
his aura is definitely cooler than most James Taylor.
Yeah, and he had been away for a while. He just released a new album, I think like a week and a half prior, and he had taken, I guess, a little break. It had been like almost 2 years since his last album, so it was kind of a big deal, I think, getting James Taylor on the show and showcasing him. He got 3 numbers last time he was on as well. Must be written into his rider. But it was interesting that like this was the first song he played of the 3 because it's really the only rock number. I legitimately thought this is like a new James Taylor. Like he's trying to be a new version of himself with this first song.
Right.
But I don't know. I didn't love this song very much at all.
It's nice and mellow, but maybe adds to the low energy feel of this show because you've had a pretty wordy monologue, a pretty low energy cold open.
Oh, if it's low energy you want, stand by, sir. He'll be on 2 more times. And it just gets lower and lower. So JT knows what the people want.
It's the ambient hour.
You mentioned the section, though, Gary. I did notice. Do you know Waddy Witchell? You know who that is? The other guitar player playing? Yeah. He's awesome. Like one of the all-time session players. That's the thing I actually noticed, too, when the band came on, was seeing Waddy play. Like he's big Warren Zevon guy and Randy Newman and stuff. And I loved seeing him on the stage.
Yeah, I love this band. I think they're great. And it was fun to see them. So
you do love this band.
Yeah. Well, our first sketch of the night after this is Family Classics. So we saw this last time Michael Palin was on the show, and it's Miles Cowperthwaite. This time we get chapter 2, I Am Nailed to the Hull. So this is the sketch that, Brad, you were referencing as being, this is 15 minutes. This is a 15-minute sketch.
This is 15. Yeah, I had to look. Yes, 15.
Right from the start. There's like, we're not going to ease into this at all. We're just going to put this sketch on and keep going.
Bring out the Raging Queen.
Yes. So Miles Cowperthwaite is put to sea on the Raging Queen with Captain Ned, played by John, who is manly and has a manful ship and is very strict. Dan is the first mate.
Which they did set up, as you mentioned. In part 1, Captain Ned does take Miles away from the Dan Aykroyd, the home where he was living. So they do kind of set this whole premise up the first.
So they were planning this right from the start.
I feel so, because they definitely, it's the same exact character. Garrett plays the same character in that first sketch. He shows up with Captain Ned, and Captain Ned comes to take Miles away at the end of chapter 1.
That's interesting, because that implies that the Palin return was planned. If he's the centerpiece, if he's the title character, and they did it as a cliffhanger, that's interesting. Maybe it was planned as far back as the first appearance.
At least some return. Like you've got to think, of course, they'll take like I said, they'll take Michael Palin every other week, I'm sure. So let's set something up for Michael to come back, because he's done the Nerds twice as Mr. Brighton, and we should say that was actually a sketch that was written for this episode that went to dress and didn't make it to air. But the Mr. Brighton character in the Nerds was supposed to come back, so they're doing a good job of trying to really ingrain him into the cast and giving him his own recurring characters to keep coming back every time he hosts. So hopefully he will be back more and more. And
we see that with Buck and with Steve Martin.
Yeah.
So this really is just a lot of it's a lot of gay jokes. It's a lot of guys at sea on the ship. There's a lot of footage intercut of a ship at sea. I don't know where that footage came from.
Well, they needed something to cut from, because it keeps jumping in time. It keeps jumping in time and in place. So people have got to run and change positions. So they need some kind of a transition sequence.
Nautical interstitials.
Yeah. Yeah. And they work to get you from point A to point B, I guess, because they have to move all around. So there's a whole lot of punishment happening, and the crew are very into the punishment.
Everybody wants to be punished.
Doctor. Yeah. Eventually they find a boat with Lorraine and Gilda on it, and they come aboard.
Not before they ask, are there any men on your ship?
Right.
And they say no.
And then they
pirates,
go off looking for pirates,
because the pirates took the men and took them. They were like very brutal to them and took the men away. And then they take 6 months of their voyage looking for the pirates.
Yeah.
Eventually landing in Key West.
That was one of the manly ports they were going to take Miles to: Mykonos, Key West, and San Francisco.
It was at that point in my notes where I had, man, this is still going.
There were a few points in my notes where I had that reaction.
Yeah.
It's kind of a one joke sketch, and although there are a few little things in it that made me laugh, but I think the main joke has not dated too well. I think we probably agree.
Yeah.
Right. Dan Aykroyd plays Mr. Spunk. He's a very camp character.
Yes.
Talks about banana bread, but it's Yeah, they hit that beat a lot.
Yeah, and when they can't hit that beat, they hit the sexual assault beat of first Captain Ned and then the ladies going to Miles' bedroom at night and trying to seduce him and assault him.
Yes.
There was a funny line I like at one point somewhere, probably around minute 7 or 8. Miles is telling the story of what they do and how it's, hours of punishment and then lunch and then hours of punishment and then an hour of sailing. And there was a line I liked. It goes, every once in a while we had duties like steering the ship and trying to get the sails to fill up with wind.
I got to say, my favorite thing about this sketch by far is everything that Bill Murray does. And Bill Murray is the doctor of the ship who is in charge of all the medical stuff and just wants to amputate everyone's limbs for no reason. Yes. And it really, every time he said anything, I was really laughing. I was like, the whole sketch should be about this guy because at the end he wants to cut off Michael's leg because it gets wet.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, James Taylor plays a guy on board and he wants to cut off his arm to get to his leg, to cut off his leg. And Miles is like, we could just move his arm. And Bill's like, well, if that's the way you want to go, sure, we could do it that way.
I agree, Nick. I thought Bill was my favorite character in this whole piece because of that particular joke, Brad. Totally won me over.
Yeah.
And it did help me sustain, that joke was like 4 or 5 minutes into the piece.
Yes, well, it was short bursts. But
the sketch is so long. Miles escapes the boat at night, not once, but twice in this sketch. He jumps overboard to try to escape the boat.
That's right.
We do get a great joke. Sorry, I was just going to say, we do get a great joke off the back of that when we find out that chapter 3 is called Eaten by Sharks.
Yes.
Which made me laugh. So there's some good moments scattered in there. It's just long stretches of barren wasteland in between.
Yeah.
Who do you guys think the second time Miles tries to escape, it's obviously not Palin because he's in the bed and they just do a quick dissolve and it's dark. Did you guys have any thought? So who that was?
Do you know the answer?
No. I'm saying I don't know. I thought it looked like Al Franken. He had that husky Al Franken shuffle to him. I was guessing it was Al Franken just covered up.
I'm going to say Gary Busey. I think he broke back into the studio.
He wasn't even sure there was a sketch going on. He just wanted to jump off of that set.
He left some stuff in 8H.
Yeah, it's funny. I can't remember. I think it was in the Hill and Weingrad book, but I remember reading somewhere that near the end of season 3, but especially in season 4, the writers would have a tendency to write very big set pieces. Because the idea being, if they spent the time and money and energy in building these big sets, you had a better chance of your sketch making it to air because they wouldn't waste all that time and money. And I think this is a prime example of something like that because I believe this was at the time like the most expensive or most elaborate set that they built for the show.
It is pretty elaborate. The deck that they build.
There's a great backdrop for the sun behind them. Yeah.
They're climbing up ropes. Like Franken starts the sketch climbing up the ropes and then they have the whole cabin set too, where
and it all looks
Miles
great.
Is assaulted.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful set for a one-note sketch. It's kind of a shame.
I know, it's amazing watching this in comparison to Pepsi Syndrome, something that was so long and worked so well. And now this is just like, because that was so intricate and had so many pieces is why that worked. And the exact opposite is why I think this doesn't work is because, like Nick said, it's just so one note. It's so one note and you can only play it so long.
I also think Michael is a bit lost in the middle of it. And these sketches are named after his character, but I don't know if there's much of a character there. And it's unfortunate all the way through this episode, even when Michael is in a sketch, which isn't that often.
Yeah.
He is not served that well. And he doesn't get much to do in this.
Yeah, it's more of a John sketch than a Michael sketch. And I feel like the first one that he did, the first Miles Copperfield sketch, he had a lot more to do.
That's a good point, though, Nick, is that he did not get a lot to do at all tonight. And this is just the beginning of it, where this character, even in the first chapter of the Family Classics of the Miles Copperthwaite story, he was more of a piece to get you through the crazy characters. And in this one, it really is this crazy situation that he's put in. But it feels like a missed opportunity because it's Michael Palin.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird just seeing him as the straight man when he can do so much more.
Yeah. Well, that was 15 minutes of the show.
God, it was, yeah.
So We're going to go right to a live commercial then for Ravco's Magnagrow. We see Lorraine and Bill lamenting that they can't grow tulips in the city. And then we get a live pitch from Dan as a scientist talking about Ravco's Magnagrow. I mean, you saw all the beakers.
I saw the beakers and the blackboard
right?
behind him. Yeah, maybe he was a scientist. I thought he was just the pitch man. But yeah.
I wrote down scientist, but I don't know. I can't cite my evidence for that. I just got a scientist vibe from him.
I'm pretty sure he was in a lab coat. I don't know. But it was not your normal Ravco Dan pitch man because he was in this totally different setting. And it's just this stuff that makes your tulips grow. And then we see Lorraine water the tulip with the Ravco Magnagrow. And then this giant tulip goes up and Bill arm wrestles it, I think is the end of the sketch.
I'm still reeling from the Raging Queen. I don't know what was going on in this sketch.
Did either of you guys think about Little Shop of Horrors when you were watching this with Bill in it and the plant? And I wanted more. When the plant burst out, I thought, oh, this is a really fun premise for something. And you thought it was going to go Audrey. And it just is over too fast.
They're like, guys, sorry, we blew the budget on the Raging Queen. We can't afford the plant. I'm sorry.
The tulip budget was gone. But I think there's definitely a seed of no pun intended of comedy gold here with Dan Aykroyd injecting steroids into plants and Bill Murray kind of getting attacked by it. I just think, how is that not? It just felt underwritten, and that could have been a really great sketch had they gone a bit further with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if they didn't try to shoehorn it into a Ravco commercial and to your point, Nick, flesh it out into something more, it could have been a lot of fun.
Probably a budget thing. They would have had to have built a puppet and it probably wouldn't have worked well. I know they had a nightmare on Little Shop of Horrors with the flowers. So,
right.
Well, probably just a casualty of the episode in general. Like, because there were a few sketches that didn't make it, and they're probably your longer, more fleshed out sketches where this was probably always just meant to be a Ravco pitch, short and sweet, to the point kind of thing. But it's like after what you just saw, you want something more, even out of something so short.
And it wasn't the typical Dan live pitchman that we've seen. And, I think we've seen this in different iterations, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But just the energy that he typically brings was not there in this sketch.
Yeah, and he's been slowly pulling back, it feels like, too. It's become more of show Lorraine and Bill with the product than Dan just talking about it. And as they've done the last 3 or 4 of these, I think it's that balance has kind of shifted even more.
I quite enjoyed the line at the end, the disclaimer, not for use on Vines, which is just a fun little throwaway. Like, what? It implies that Dan Aykroyd tried it on Vines and something went horribly wrong.
That is a good throwaway at the end. Well, that commercial leads us into Weekend Update, where we get a photo of 2 basset hounds. And Jane says, Ethel Merman and Ernest Borgnine remarried. I didn't think that was necessary to poor Ethel Merman. And then we get a bunch of Weekend Update jokes. A lot about the gas crisis.
Yeah.
Skylab. Takes a shot at NASA, which I wasn't sure why they were doing, but they did. I like the mice and who are Hare Krishnas. That was fun. And then we get part 3 of our Chico Escuela triumvirate.
The season begins. He makes the team, and the regular season begins.
And age has finally caught up to 42-year-old Chico Escuela. I swore he wasn't 42 in the other parts, but I'm probably wrong.
He was 41. The first one I remember, he was 41. I said he's a 41-year-old.
Okay, 41 that's what I thought.
Back. Well, maybe he had his birthday.
But now he's 42.
I don't know.
Right, that's true.
Do you have his bio in front of you? Look it up.
I do not. It's just clips of Chico committing errors and then taking one in the crotch. And then we learn that Chico's comeback is over. And he will be back on the Weekend Update desk.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Quitting again.
That's a shame. I enjoyed these these Chico Escuela bits. Like, I liked that it was a runner and it was all, filmed pieces of him down in spring training.
I would have enjoyed this more if Bill had done a remote himself again. Like, that was fun. Something about just watching the clips with a voiceover. I didn't buy into it as much. I liked the first one better, like when Bill was right there and he's doing a live remote and he's part of it. And I don't know how you'd incorporate it into this, but just that kind of the clips of the errors and Bill doing a voiceover, I didn't love it as much.
Nick, do you have any thoughts on Chico Escuela?
I'm finding it hard to connect to Chico Escuela.
Is it because it's baseball and you don't have that over there? Is that why?
I think it might be. It might be that. I'm struggling to find where the comedy is. I didn't mind the one like when you said when Bill was remote and he was there talking to the players.
Yeah.
There was some funny bits there, but I didn't really laugh at this bit. I got to admit.
Yeah.
Even the last one where he interviews other players, like Craig Nettles, it works because Bill's part of it. To your point, Brad.
And even Garrett's not doing much as Chico, other than committing errors. You're like, there's just not a lot of interaction. There's not a lot of stuff to hang on to.
Yeah. Well, then we get women in the news, and newly elected British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, played by Palin, is interviewed by Jane. There was a Jeremy Thorpe joke that didn't land because the audience probably wasn't sure who Jeremy Thorpe was. But then Jane goes off on the Prime Minister, Thatcher, about Rhodesia and just, goes right at her and yells at her, leading Margaret Thatcher to call Jane an ignorant slut.
Mrs. Prime Minister, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Jane.
Well, first of all, our congratulations on becoming Great Britain's first woman Prime Minister.
Well, thank you, Jane, but throughout our history, Great Britain has been blessed by several great women leaders. Queen Elizabeth, Queen Victoria, Jeremy Thorpe.
Mrs. Thatcher, during the campaign, you stopped wearing those outlandish hats you were known for. Now that you've been elected, do you plan to start wearing hats again?
What are you talking about, Jane? This is a hat. Yes, it's my lucky hat. I wore it all throughout the campaign.
I see. Well, to turn to more serious matters, Mrs. Prime Minister, are you going to reverse England's Rhodesia policy and lift sanction against the new government?
Yes, I am leaning that way, Jane. After all, there was an election, one person, one vote. Now, I ask you...
excuse me, it wasn't exactly one person, one vote. The whites were obviously...
Yes, can I just finish? There is an internal settlement. There is a black prime minister elected in a democratic election.
Not really democratic. The internal settlement was...
May I finish?
The internal settlement guaranteed the whites a disproportionate number of seats in Parliament, enough to veto any meaningful change for the next 10 years. Whites will continue to control the police, the army, the civil service, housing, perpetuating the system of oppression that fuels the fire of revolution and creates a breeding ground for Soviet expansionism.
Jane, you're an ignorant slut.
That made me laugh.
Yeah.
That's a great callback and just so unexpected and so perfect for update. It was a great little punchline.
Yes.
I looked up Monty Python and Margaret Thatcher because I thought I had a feeling there might be some history, and it was 1990 at the Conservatives kind of big event. Margaret Thatcher quoted the Dead Parrot sketch at length because the Liberal Democrats had changed their symbol to a bird. And she started saying it's a late parrot, it's an ex-parrot, it's a parrot no more. And then she ended by saying, and now for something completely different. And then Michael Palin writes about this in his diary from his later diaries from that time and says that Terry Jones wanted to sue her.
Oh my God.
They had to talk him down. But then also there's a twist to that where she then lost the election she was talking about to the Liberal Democrats, and Paddy Ashdown, who was the leader of the Liberal Democrats, said the parrot has twitched and had the last laugh. So I love that there was this big political battle involving a Monty Python sketch.
That's great.
I agree with you, Gary. I thought Jane was great. She did a great job in her rant on Margaret Thatcher. She sounded just like Dan. And I mean that as a compliment of like the verbiage and just the rat-tat-tat-tat-tat, and just it was so well written, and she did such a great job. It's like, how great is Jane? Because she so delivers on this.
How great is Jane? We've seen her do this before at Dan in some ways, but to do this to Palin, essentially to a green screen, because she's staring at a green screen. She did an excellent job.
Yeah.
Always satisfying to see someone having a go at Margaret Thatcher, even if it is just Michael Palin in a wig. But an enjoyable sight.
In 1979 even. Still funny. Well, we come back and we get Bill, and this time Jane singing with him Happy Birthday to Fred Astaire. again. So this is our third week in a row of seeing this, Brett.
The happy birthdays. I didn't love this one.
Yeah.
I didn't love
No.
I hate to say it, I didn't love the Jane bit. It felt very like we saw something like this in season 2. Maybe it was the dancing end with her and Dan, but I didn't love Bill and Jane singing together.
I kind of wanted them to be dancing or doing something more than just holding a top hat and cane.
Right.
I quite enjoyed the fact that they just stayed sitting behind the desk and they were trying to do a Fred Astaire dance while just sitting. They're not even standing up.
I get the irony of it now that you say it like that. Okay.
Well, I don't know if that was even intended, but I thought it was a fun, odd little beat. I enjoyed it. Yeah. But then I love, Pennies from Heaven, where Steve Martin does the Fred Astaire dance in front of Fred Astaire. Yes. And I guess this generation of comedians had a fondness for him.
Oh, that's
maybe.
true. Yeah.
Sure. He was huge for that, right? Growing up at that time, yeah, he was all around. Well, after that, we get Father Guido Sarducci. He comes on and has an idea for a shrine mobile because gas prices are so high.
Yeah.
Instead of people needing to pay for gas, you can take the shrines to them. And then he launches into this thing about a new planet that they've discovered that's simultaneously coming at us at 30,000 miles an hour and going away from us at 30,000 miles an hour. Did I get that right?
Yeah, they can't tell who's coming and who's going. Yeah. 100 was like 100 years out and 100 years in. The whole story was funny. People meet each other crossing paths. So you have like a 30-year-old on their way out meeting a 30-year-old on the way back. And then a few years later, it'd be 32 and 28. And after a while, he goes, pretty soon you find yourself in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Because one was getting older as the other was getting younger.
That was funny. I enjoyed that. There's some hard sci-fi in this monologue.
Yes, there is.
There's like multiverses and the corn on the cob line. I mean, there was a lot, but I enjoyed all of his stuff this week.
The corn on the cob was hilarious.
Planet
I did.
Where everything
I laughed
is
out
identical
loud.
to Earth, but they eat corn on the cob like down
vertically.
Vertically instead of horizontally. And he's like, I'm not gonna go there. I can't deal with that.
Yeah.
I'm set in my ways.
Too messy.
My favorite line of it, though, I got to say, was from the beginning, even before that, when he's talking about the first thing you were talking about, Gary, the shrine mobile, and he brings the idea. Yeah. Oh, because he didn't have that's what it was. He didn't have his badges or stripes or something. And he's like, I got a really good idea. And he goes into it and everyone's naysaying. And he goes, hey, where's that whole walk on water kind of spirit at? That was my favorite.
I wrote that line down as well.
Yeah,
it's like a
great line.
Said in like a perfect Father Guido Sarducci way. It was so funny.
The way in which he delivers his lines are perfect.
Yeah.
So him, Don Novello, the way he writes for this character and then delivers it is amazing. It's really good.
He's so relaxed. Like the way he just takes his time getting to where it's got this real rambling kind of energy to it. And it's fantastic. It really works.
It really does. That's it for Weekend Update. I don't know. Pretty typical Weekend Update. I thought it was pretty good overall.
It got better.
Yeah, and they've kind of been, leaning less on jokes and more on pieces. We're getting like 3 kind of pieces in a Weekend Update. Seems kind of typical for the end of this season. Yeah.
Well, after Weekend Update, we get James Taylor back. He plays his song Up on the Roof.
This is more like
Yes, this is from that same album. Yeah.
Yes. This is the JT we come to know and love. The album did not go over very well, but this was the one single that came from it. And I think actually might have been a top 40 hit.
Oh, really?
I mean, you could see why. This is a quintessential James Taylor song, I feel like.
Right.
Vibe, mood, everything. This is James Taylor.
Yeah.
Fine. I mean, it's James Taylor. Fine.
Exactly.
I fell asleep during the song. Sorry. I can't contribute.
Well, we'll come back to you on his third song then, Nick. Curious how you stayed awake for that one.
Right.
After James Taylor, we get not a 15-minute sketch. It's only 12 minutes.
Oof.
But it is a 12-minute sketch. The Boulevard of Proud Chicano Cars. So,
good luck.
It starts out with,
There's a lot to unpack.
So, I don't want to. This is a present that I want to keep in the box and let someone else open it. John and Gilda start out as Pablo, and I thought Donna, but then I got very
it's
confused.
Carlos.
No, I know it's Carlos, but I swore he called her Donna at some point at the beginning.
Really?
Well, that's this is what led to some of my
Now I see
confusion
why
about
you're
this
so
sketch, but-
confused.
No. That's not the only thing that confused me. And they're looking for gas, and John has it, and Gilda needs it. He tells her where he got it. Garrett comes on as a cop.
Yes.
Who's bugging them about being in a gang.
They're not a
So
gang. They're a club.
They're not a gang. They're a club.
Yes.
That's the running joke throughout this 12 minutes. Eventually, John leaves and Garrett leaves, and Gilda goes to get gas from Michael Palin, who's in this 12-minute sketch all of 45 seconds, maybe.
Right.
And then we're in a house.
That's part one, right? Because there's basically three separate sketches to this. So that's part one.
Right. Part two starts in a living room setting with Bill as a father, and Jane comes down as his daughter, asking if the doorbell rang because she's going on a date. And the doorbell eventually rings, and Gilda comes in as Carlos, not Donna.
Correct.
And take her on a date. And Bill asks her flat out if she's in a gang. No, I'm in a club. And then Gilda has Jane siphon gas out of her father's car so they can go out. And then there's a whole sexual innuendo piece there with the siphoning of gas out of the car.
Yes. Correct.
Into his car.
And then it ends with Bill opening the door to yell out them, and he sees this. He sees and so again, the sexual innuendo, and he sees his daughter, and he says something like, "Get your mouth off of that," or, blah, blah, blah. And then he walks over to the dresser and takes out his gun. I think it's very important because it leads you into the third part, him with the gun.
So then my note is, now we're with Lorraine, ? Because we were. Lorraine is playing what turns out to be the mother of John. And John brings home Gilda, who has been shot by Bill in our last scene.
Gilda, who plays Carlos.
Still Carlos, not Donna. And now we have Gilda, who's been shot, and Lorraine has just made dinner for someone who's in the bathroom, and that person comes out, and it's Jimmy Carter.
Correct.
And then Jimmy Carter is there to spend the night with a typical Mexican family for some reason. And he is talking to them about, yes.
This is politics in 1979.
No, I know. Because he doesn't make it any more clear as to why he did it.
Right.
Brett.
Well,
but
fair,
anyway.
Fair.
And then he talks to John and Gilda about their not gang, but their club and what they do. And he helps them to decide to set up a livery service. Since they're going up and down the boulevard anyway, they can give folks ride. So they're starting a business. And that is the sketch.
Yes. All I can do is try to piece together for you how this epic thing came together. Because it is three different sketches kind of woven together. So the first half of it, or the first part.
Very loosely. It's a very loose thread.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first sequence, the one about them looking and trying to buy gas. I guess overall there was a movie that had come out around this time in March called Boulevard Nights, about a pair of brothers, and it was about gangs. Actually, the studio themselves tried to distance the film from like other gang films, like The Warriors and stuff. So they actually tried to call it a film about family and not about gangs. So I'm thinking that's where the whole gang club joke kept coming from throughout the piece.
That's interesting.
So that's, I think, where so they're doing a parodying this recent film about a couple brothers. The part about the gas and stealing the gas is actually an old National Lampoon bit that Brian Dole Murray did with John Belushi, with John playing the Gilda role of looking for gas, and Brian Dole Murray played the guy who won the gas can, like literally, like almost line for line, including stuff like, why don't you go buy some blubber, find an Eskimo and buy some blubber. So that's an old piece Brian Dole Murray had back in the day that they put into this. And then the last half of it with the siphoning and all is another Brian Dole Murray piece from Second City that he did back with Betty Thomas and Joe Flaherty, where it was like a woman and trying to get was with a guy. Joe Flaherty played like a guy she was cheating on her husband with, and for him to try to convince her that she loved him, she was supposed to siphon the gas from her husband's tank. So there's like, that's where all these pieces I think kind of originated or came from, and how they then somehow came together, which is, like you said, Gary, very loosely stitched. And then the Jimmy Carter thing actually did happen. He did that May 5th. He was in L.A. and as a, what do you call it? As a stunt, went to spend a night with the Mexican American family to learn more about them and the issues that they had as voters, because he was getting his ass kicked in the polls.
I wonder if maybe they should have picked one. That's really interesting, by the way. I didn't know that background, and now it makes more sense. It doesn't necessarily make it funnier, but it makes more sense.
Exactly.
It's like I guess watching this sketch is like watching Memento, where you're trying to piece everything together. It's like, but I can't say I laughed. I wonder whether Palin, and then I guess they shoehorned Palin as the mechanic in because they had him, and so he's playing this British mechanic in the middle of LA.
Well, and I did not remember that this was that long of a sketch. And even at that part, it's a long sketch. And I wrote, that was my favorite part of the sketch so far, was him and Gilda. I think as performers, they're just so good. It reminded me of Candy Slice. Like watching Gilda with another strong performer, when she has somebody really great to play off of, no matter what they do, it's fun. And I just, watching the two of them, that little sequence back and forth, like you said, Gary, it may have only been 40, 45 seconds. It was probably a couple of minutes.
But I wonder if it just because of the gas thing maybe got Belushi remembering that they had done that material, years earlier or whatever. And so it was like, you got to put this in. And then it sort of started mutating.
Yeah. And Brian's writing on the show. He's a writer at this point. So he's probably got, let's put this in. And, the gas crisis was a big deal at that time. I think they were like weeks or months away from California doing that odd even lottery to get gas. I mean, they had written about it before, so they could pull it out. It was an easy thing they had. I feel like you could easily get rid of the middle thing with Bill Murray and the family. That went nowhere other than to shoot Gilda.
That was all for the dick jokes.
Well, yeah. And as far as the contract of the sketch, just to give a reason to come to the house with Gilda with a bullet wound, I guess. But you could have gone right from like the gas. I'm not saying, I do think it'd be better if you went right from the gas thing and Gilda left, and then they went home to their mom, and then you see the Jimmy Carter, because they of course want to comment on the Jimmy Carter thing.
Right.
I think it'd make it better.
I don't know. It was a long sketch.
It was long. That's the problem.
Not a lot of payoffs. And I think like the Miles Cowperthwaite thing in the beginning, like Nick was saying, there are a lot of really good lines, and here and there throughout the 15 minutes, there were things that you could laugh at. And it was just kind of, all right, let's get on with it already. It was another really long sketch that didn't have any real payoff or any fun things to even latch on to.
I agree completely with that. Yeah, it just kind of sits there. I wrote down long and flat, and I didn't even make many notes because I didn't really, there wasn't much to grab onto. It just kind of dragged and plodded on. It's a shame. And again, Michael is barely in it. It's easy to forget he's in this sketch at all.
Yeah.
And justice for Palin.
Yeah. That's the shame of it, is you could have held on to this for, like, any other host could have done what Michael Palin did, really, as far as moving that sketch along.
I mean, he was very good in it.
Maybe just an example of a sketch by committee where everyone wanted to contribute, and it's like those movies where all the executives want to have their thing in it, and then it ends up pleasing no one.
Yeah,
try to offer it.
It's a good call.
Yeah. Well, what's next is Mr. Bill, and this time Mr. Bill runs away, playing on the theme of trying to get away from Mr. Hand because he's not sure that Mr. Hand is good for him and or Spot. He's hitchhiking to get out of town, and who should come along but Mr. Hand? I
like how he had a little hobo bag. Mr. Bill's got one of those little sticks with hobo bag. He's on the side of the road. In disguise. Uh-huh. He's in disguise.
Yes, he's in disguise. That's right. I forgot he was in disguise.
Him and Spot. Spot's got some kind of sunglass and beard disguise as well.
I like the, continuing on the story of trying to get away from Mr. Hand, but just can't seem to.
There was a fun line. I think it was when the car pulls over before he knows it's Mr. Hand, and they pull over. He's like, "Yay!" as opposed to the no. It's like Mr. Bill, yay!
Right.
Gets a huge cheer from the audience.
It does.
I know you guys have been tracking this more than me, but does Mr. Bill usually get that kind of reaction?
Yeah.
They love Mr. Bill in season 4.
Yes, they do.
Huge cheer. And maybe it was more noticeable because we just had like 15 minutes or whatever of dead silence.
That's true too. Yeah.
I'm not the world's biggest Mr. Bill fan, but I have to say this was an enjoyable segment. I think maybe because it was like the season finale of this arc, and they were building up to this, and it's it's action packed. It's like watching the end of a 24 season or something. This car going off the cliff.
They did have some impressive.
Oh yeah,
they had some impressive video footage of the car like speeding against the side of the hill and going. I did notice that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good end to the sketch. So just when you thought the audience was into it and the energy was coming back because of Mr. Bill, we get James Taylor back for number 3. Mill worker is going to sing.
Man, my first note was, holy shit, once again? Woo.
He's back.
He is back.
Yeah.
There's no stopping him.
No.
And this really was my quintessential James Taylor because he's by himself with an acoustic guitar, just doing his thing.
Maybe the band had left the building. They thought there were only 2 songs. And,
that's it. We're done.
He was like, stay put. I don't mind. I actually like all 3 of these songs, and they're very pleasant, if a bit dozy. But it all is time that could have gone towards Michael Palin doing something on this episode, and so I resent that.
See, Brad, this is what you get when you have an actual British person on the show to talk about British comedians.
Mm-hmm. But they don't want to talk.
Anger. It turns out.
Anger towards James Taylor.
Because
yes, repressed fury. Very polite fury.
Very polite fury.
I mean, Gary, tell me if I'm wrong, but you're in trouble with during your musical performance, Davey Wilson starts messing with the video. If he starts doing crossfades or superimposing, you're in trouble with your performance.
Yep. That means it's just someone sitting there. You have to add some energy into it somehow.
Not a good sign.
But I thought at this point this was going to be the way we were going to close out the show. Too. And I was like, we're closing out the show with this? Uh-huh. That's not good. Uh-huh. But instead we get Tom Snyder and his mom, who we've seen before, played by Jane, out to dinner for Mother's Day.
Yes!
Mom, I'd just like to say that this is sort of a double occasion tonight, as I'm taking you out for Mother's Day, and we're also celebrating the return of the Tomorrow Show to Gotham.
Well, by golly, I'm happy to be here, too, Tommy. But let me say this to you, bearing in mind that a mother is, as well as being her son's biggest fan, also his harshest critic.
Yes,
you look like hell.
Well, don't bring me down, Mom.
I brought you up. Why shouldn't I bring you down? If you'll just hear me out, son, you'll find I'm using humor to illustrate a point. The fact is, Tom, you're doing the Tomorrow Show. You've just taken on a new show called Primetime, and there's talk about you anchoring the news. So my question then to you, son, is why the heck don't you slow down before you burn yourself out?
All right, fair enough. You're my mother. You want to know what makes Tommy run? Work is my life. TV is my home. I enjoy talking to strangers, asking inane questions, and rambling incoherently in front of millions of viewers at 1 o'clock in the morning.
All right, Tom, fair enough. But it's a mother's prerogative to be concerned for her son.
Mom, you've always been my best gal. It was Dad I always had the problem with. I was afraid he knew how I felt about you and was jealous of us. By God, I'd like to have a nickel for every night I laid awake in my bed for fear he'd come in and snip the darn thing off.
But I wish I had a nickel for every time I stopped.
I don't know. I enjoyed this because I really like the Tom Snyder character, and I really enjoyed Jane doing
so
it.
Good.
Right? We've seen her. She's so good in this. We've seen her do this just once before.
It was last Mother's Day. They had that David Susskind show, and it was all the
that's
impressions
right.
with their mothers. Like I think it was like Harry Kissinger and his mother, or Henry Kissinger and his mother, and this one, yeah.
I thought this was a fun way to go out. Since James Taylor was not the end of the show, I thought this was a fun way to go out of the show.
Yeah, I agree. It's very funny. It's too short, I thought. I wanted more of it.
Yeah.
It just felt maybe it got curtailed.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the show was running long. It had that feeling.
Yeah.
Was it just me, or does Dan not have his hair grayed up as Snyder? Am I wrong?
Not as much.
No, you're not wrong.
I mean,
It
to be
felt like
fair,
they've forgotten to do that.
To be fair, I feel like there's never a set amount. It always changes every single time. But I agree with you. It did look. I thought that too. It did look very light.
But yeah, Jane nails the voice. The laugh is hilarious
So
as Mama Snyder. I really enjoyed it, and it just like I wanted another 3 or 4 minutes of material with these two. But hey, there was James Taylor. He had to do another song.
Oh God, I think you're right. One of my early notes too, I said was, thank God they did not cut this. Like, thank God it at least made it because it was so fun to see. And I think you're right. I think it got condensed because. Now, hear me out on this because I agree it ends the show nice because it's the only time they really acknowledge Mother's Day. So it plays a little sweeter than, comedy. It's a nice closer. But because what we ended up seeing was so short, what do you think if they would have hammed it up a little bit more and made this the cold open? What if this is your cold open and you come in on a twofer by themselves? And you just ham it up so it's a little bit more funny. It's a little more of that Tom Snyder falling. And then you just somehow work. And at the end where he gives her the gift and she said, I got something for you. And you could have finally given Jane Curtin her Live from New York she hasn't had yet all season, all show, all series.
Oh, I love that.
I kept seeing this and I was like, this would have been such a great cold open, especially compared to what we got.
Oh, I love that idea. Yeah.
Yeah. That is the best idea you've ever had.
Thank you.
Just full stop. Just
next week on the early years, we'll be talking about. No, it's all I could think of.
I've been on the receiving end of a lot of your ideas, and this is your best.
They're
one.
typically bad.
Nicely done.
I agree. No, and I think as a Nick's point, because it got so short that it felt like a cold open because it was so short.
Yeah,
but
no, I love the idea of Jane getting the Live from Saturday Night line as a Mother's Day gift.
It's so set up. It's like I almost felt like it was set up for it when he gave her the gift, and she's like, "I've got something for you. What is it?" Boom.
Yeah, that would have been good. We did gloss over the whole part where he confessed to his mother that he spent a lot of nights thinking about her in bed, afraid that his father would come in, and I believe he just said, "Chop it off" or something to that effect.
And then I had a lot of therapy to forget that, so thanks for resurfacing it.
Well, because doesn't Jane have the line, if I had a nickel for every time I stopped him?
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. But it was fun. It would have been great as a cold open.
Yeah.
I would have enjoyed that a lot more than the cold open we got. Yeah, that would have been fun. But it wasn't meant to be. Instead, that was it. That's our show. Sorry, Nick.
We
didn't get a full Michael Palin show for you.
Well, yeah, I know that there was the nerd sketch that he that got cut at Dress, like I think you said, Brad, and but then apparently I think Michael Palin has said it was about Mr. Brighton arriving with a Pakistani wife, and Palin didn't like it, and I have a feeling that we were all saved by that sketch not appearing in the show. So maybe it's a blessing, but it needed another couple of Palin sketches, heavy sketches.
You can hear that sketch online. I think it's on the DVD bonus features, like the rehearsal of it, so you can actually hear the audio of it. And I will say, Gary, to the show's credit for the nerds, they are continuing the nerd storyline because in the episode, Gilda thinks she's pregnant, and so she's telling her mom that she's pregnant with a child, and it's either Todd's or Mr. Brighton's. And then Mr. Brighton's wife, for some reason, figures that the test was wrong because she's never had sex with anybody yet, so she couldn't be pregnant. But they're still kind of continuing the story arc of the nerds after we saw them with Richard Benjamin, Todd trying to have sex with her. But you can hear it, and it's Lorraine she's done like a Pakistani character before. And so it's exactly, Gary, what we've seen before. I assume it's what we've seen before because it sounds like what she's done before.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds a little bit offensive, but I mean, the nerds would have given you some energy at least, which I think is lacking a bit from this episode.
Yeah, I think to your point, the nerds would have been great because the crowd reacted to Father Guido Sarducci.
Yeah.
They reacted to Mr. Bill, and I think they were looking for something to react to. That if you had the nerds in there, you would have, had the energy from the crowd. Which I think just kind of got zapped in those, 15 and 12 minute sketches. That's a long time.
That's all you have. And 3 musical numbers. You have 3 musical numbers, 2 long-ass sketches, and Weekend Update. That's pretty much it. You know, Mr. Bill, Cold Open, and that really quick little thing. Oh, man.
Yeah. And the Ravco Magna Grove.
Oh, the Ravco, yeah. The episode just never found itself, like what it wanted to be or what it wanted to do. I like Nick, as you mentioned, I don't know why James Taylor has 3 songs. Especially when none of them are hits. They're all stuff no one's heard of because the album's just come out. Do you really need him sitting by himself playing a song from his Broadway show? Like, give Michael Palin another sketch. It's
very odd. Well, yeah. Well, they were given that the show was running half an hour long at Dress to not cut one of those songs. There must have been some agreement, or he was pals with Lorne, or something was going on. But yeah, I mean, in Palin's words, the show is heavy. He said it feels heavy and much more hit and miss than my previous 2 shows. So he was very self-aware or aware of what was its deficiencies. But it's a shame because I think, like I said, I think the monologue is very sharp. Mm-hmm. If they had opened with the Snyders as the cold open, that would have been there were ways they could have fixed this, definitely, or improved it.
It's not like you needed to feature John. Like he was big in that Miles and he was big in the Chicano. It's like you didn't have to have John in your cold open.
No, but I guess they needed to go after Fred Silverman again for some reason.
One more time.
Yeah. Well, Nick, every week on this show, we talk about our best bits. So what are your best bits?
The monologue, the final sketch, the Tom Snyder's mother. And actually, I thought it was a really strong update. I enjoyed this update a lot. I think it started a bit softly. Like I've said, I don't love Chico Escuela, but everything from Michael appearing as Margaret Thatcher on, I enjoyed. I thought that, and especially Father Guido was really funny, I thought, this week.
Brad, what are your best bits?
Man, I had trouble. And I kind of tried to resolve with Michael Palin's performances when he was able to do anything of merit. So monologue, and I don't think, not really Miles Copperthwaite, but monologue. And I really did love him in the gas bit that he did. And Margaret Thatcher, like those little pieces where we got to see him do something, I thought were the best thing.
My best bits were the Margaret Thatcher piece, because I thought Michael Palin and Jane were both really good. Mm-hmm. And then the Tom Snyder and his mom, because I thought Dan and Jane were really good. So they were, you're right, they are. But I totally agree with Nick. I wish there were more Michael Palin here.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that, Nick. Oh, well.
It's a shame.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for doing this with us. It was a lot of fun. We appreciate it.
Well, I'm going to go off and watch Monty Python and the Holy Grail immediately to get my Michael Palin levels up to where they should be after this episode. But thank you guys for having me on. I love the show, and it's been a real pleasure to natter about it.
Thank you very much. Where can folks find you, get your books, read your stuff? Where should they go?
Yeah, I hopefully the books are pretty available wherever books are sold. There's an audiobook version of Wild and Crazy Guys and Last Action Heroes. Curtis Armstrong from Revenge of the Nerds reads Wild and Crazy Guys.
No kidding.
Bronson Pinchot does Last Action Heroes. And you can get them on Kindle or good old-fashioned paper. And you can find my writing in Empire magazine, which is a monthly film magazine. You can get in America, UK, wherever.
Yeah.
Is there another book in the works?
I've had an idea.
Yes,
I'm noodling around with it. But it's a recent thing, but very much in its formative stages, but possibly, hopefully.
Nice. Well, like Gary said, Wild and Crazy Guys, fantastic. If you love this podcast, and you'll love that book. And if you love the 80s as well, Last Action Heroes is another. It's such a great read. Both of them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Next week on the early years of SNL, we'll be talking about season 4, episode 19, with host Maureen Stapleton and musical guests Linda Ronstadt and Phoebe Snow.
Phoebe Snow is back. All right.
And so is Linda Ronstadt.
Officially, right?
Until then, good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.
Have a pleasant tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to the Not Ready for Primetime Project. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, please take a moment to rate and review the project wherever you find us. You can also drop us a line to let us know what you liked or didn't and what else you might like to hear in the future at nr4ptproject@gmail.com. And lastly, you can find us on social media everywhere at NR4PT Project. Thanks again for listening. Have a pleasant tomorrow.
Well, Mom, I did it because I'm fond of you, I respect you, I admire you, and well, what the heck, Mom? I love you, Mom. There, I said it, I meant it. Happy Mother's Day.
Thanks, Tommy.